I grew up in a household with a piano, and I had an older sibling who was a jazz fan, and he and his friends would come over to our house and listen to bebop records, also conduct jam sessions, that is, informal jam sessions. You know. My brother played the piano and his friends played saxophone. And they would come and they would get so excited to listen to this music and calling out the names of the performers like Bird, Diz, Monk, Miles, Hawk, Nuke, you know, and those names fascinated me because I wasn't familiar with, you know, none of my friends had those kinds of names. And so it just drew me into the music. It drew me into the culture. And
Well, who were you listening to then if they
I
were new
was
to you?
8, 9 years old.
Oh, that, or you
Yeah,
just young, you just
10.
didn't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. In that age, you know, young enough to be curious, and old enough to have some kind of understanding of what was going on around me, and able to be interested
Hmm.
and curious about what was going on musically. I would be drawn to the piano when my brother and his friends would take a break, and I would pick out little melodies that I'd heard on the records, you know, those sections of melodies, which demonstrated to my brother and my parents that I was developing an interest in this music. And that interest was sustained long enough for them to think that I was serious enough about it that I should have some lessons, some music lessons, which they provided for me, and they gave me piano lessons. But one of the little things I have to confess, since I had already developed an ear for music, and I can go to the piano and find the sounds on the piano without actually knowing anything about music, formally that is, I would try and use that same technique on my piano teacher. You know, I have my cousin play my lesson for me, and then I would memorize it and go back to my lesson and go back to my teacher and play what I had memorized. I really wasn't trying to read music, and I hadn't learned how to read music or anything like that. So, of course, she beat my little game I was playing, and she called me on the carpet for that, told my parents about it, and so naturally they were upset with me. I was wasting their money and not really demonstrated that I was really interested in what I was doing. I wasn't serious enough. But that one event, being embarrassed like that, turned the corner, helped me turn the corner, I should say. So I became a serious student of music after that. And it benefited me. When I got to high school, I wanted to join the band, a jazz band that is, but all the music students, all the students who wanted to join the jazz band also was a requirement to play in the orchestra and play in the ROTC band, or the band that played for played for the ball games, basketball, football, and in on certain periods we had to put on uniforms, military uniforms, that is, ROTC uniforms, and participate in the parades. And all of those piano players who participated in the parades, they were given an instrument called the glockenspiel. And the glockenspiel and the tone quality that that instrument produced did not sit well with my ear. And I asked my instructor as a result of that if I could switch to a horn. I didn't want to play the glockenspiel, which resulted in me being given a baritone horn. Since I didn't really know what kind of instrument, what kind of horn I wanted to play, but I'd heard a rumor that one of my older brothers, one of my older siblings had played trumpet at one time. So I asked my high school instructor, Captain Dyack, that is, if possible I could play the trumpet. At the time, there were too many trumpet players, or there were enough, I should say, trumpet players. So he put a baritone horn in my hands because it had the same fingering system as a trumpet, with the idea that at some point in the future I could make the switch from baritone horn to trumpet. Coincidentally, the influencing factor in me settling on a horn to play had to do with the mouthpiece that I used with the baritone horn. Coincidentally, it was the exact same mouthpiece that's used on the trombone. And there's no precedent for the baritone horn in the jazz field. There were saxophones, there was trumpets, there was pianos, basses, and drums, no baritone horn. Trombones, though. So the trombone set well with me. I was able to join the jazz band on the trombone since I could already read both treble and bass clef. I was very proficient on that. I learned the trombone in perhaps 3 weeks. I learned the positions in 3 weeks, and I was able to develop an embouchure for the instrument since I'd already been playing on the baritone horn, so I had a head start as far as the embouchure was concerned. So after 3 weeks, I was in the jazz band, and I haven't looked back since. Actually, toward my senior year, I was doing more jamming. I was going out to the clubs, sitting in, jamming. That was a large culture of jam sessions. Most of the musicians were participating in the jam sessions until the musicians union stayed in and outlawed the jam sessions because they didn't have any contracts and they weren't really making any dues of money of that. And at the time in Chicago, there were two separate unions. One that was servicing the white musicians, and the other one was servicing the blacks, I should say Caucasians and African Americans.
What year, Julian, was approximately when?
This was in the early to mid 1950s.
Okay.
Okay. I came out of high school in 1953, so this was like in 52, 51. Also 53 was included in that, and 54. It was around that time when the union, the musicians union, clamped down on the practice of jam session, of jamming, that is, in the clubs. And fortunately for me, after I was working with Sun Ra, I guess that would be my first professional engagement.
With Sun Ra?
With Sun Ra. And I was
in Chicago?
In Chicago. I was also going over to the west side of Chicago where the blues clubs were, and I was sitting in with people like Bo Diddley and Muddy Waters, and they would kick in a few bucks for me. I wasn't an official band member, but since I was there all the time and I was playing on the stage all the time, they sort of adopted me, and so I had that experience, and the blues was a very important factor in my education. I'm a product of the church. My mother played piano in the church. My father was a Baptist minister. My sister played piano, and we would, as a family, gather around the piano at home and sing, spirituals. So the music was a very important and active ingredient in my growing. After Sun Ra and a few other casuals growing out to nearby cities, Gary, Indiana, even as far as Detroit, Michigan, with various leaders, Chicago-based leaders, I should say. I was able to do that. But I really have to credit Lionel Hampton with being the first major. I mean, this is not belittling Sun Ra, because he was also a major ingredient, a major factor in my development. But I was so young and naive when I was working with Sun Ra. That education that I got with him, I wasn't able to really incorporate it in my personal arsenal until later when I was working with Max Roach. And I'll get to that in a minute. So in 1956, I got a call from one of my classmates who was working with Lionel Hampton. He was playing the bass. His name is Richard Evans. And he called me and asked me if I'd be interested in going out on the road with Lionel Hampton's orchestra, which I accepted. And we had the experience of going to Europe right away, my first trip to Europe. And I was really amazed by the time I got off the boat in London and at the concert hall, the jazz fans in Europe knew about my experiences. They had heard about Sun Ra's records, and so they knew my name. They knew that I'd been working with Sun Ra. And I was just blown away. They recognized, give me the recognition that they did at that early stage in my career. And it's also very encouraging that it really gave me a lot of confidence. So I stayed with Lionel Hampton until we had the band, Lionel Hampton and his band. This is after we got to come back to the States, and we worked around the United States for a while. It was about 8 months to 9 months I was with them, and then they had an offer to go to Australia, to take the band to Australia. And also on the same tour was the Kenton Orchestra. So the promoters decided, in order to save some money, they would only take half of each one of the orchestras and have the leaders take turns leading this group. And since I was one of the youngest and newest members of Lionel Hampton's orchestra, it was elected that I would stay in New York. And there was no provision to give me a retainer so I would be able to support myself while I was in New York. Already my artist fee, if you can call it that, was paltry. They were paying me $21 a night, prorated, only on the nights that I worked. And out of that, I had to pay my hotel, I had to feed myself, and so the $21 didn't go very far at all. And since I wasn't going to get anything in this period, they told me that if I was still in New York when they returned from Australia, I would have my job back. Thanks for me. Fate stepped in, and Eddie Chambly, who was an ex-member of the Lionel Hampton Orchestra, he left Lionel Hampton to marry Dinah Washington and lead her 7-piece band, which was the tour with her on the road. And he called me and asked me if I'd like to join that band. This is after about a week in New York with no income, and naturally, I accepted. And I went out on the road with Dinah Washington, and that lasted until she fired her husband and asked me if I wanted this job, but I was already married, so I declined respectfully, and decided that I would move to New York, since I spent a couple of years there already, in and out of New York. I still had my residence in Chicago, but I formally moved to New York. Went down to the Five-Spot Cafe where Johnny Griffin, another Chicagoan, was working with Thelonious Monk at the Five-Spot Cafe. Johnny took us to his apartment that morning, gave us breakfast, and then the next day he called Orrin Keaton, who was the vice president of Riverside Records, and worked out for me to have a job in the shipping department of Riverside Records, packing records and shipping them out to different distributors, which provided me with some income, so I could get a room to pay for that, and also be available for recordings. I did a recording with Johnny Griffin, with Philly Joe Jones, with Lou Mitchell, who else? Oh, I did my first recording as a leader. Orrin Keaton was arranged for my support crew, and this will blow you away. In my band, I had Tommy Flanagan on piano, Sam Jones on bass, and Elvin Jones on drums. Hello. That really put me in good company, I mean, people who picked up that record, they really put me in the same category with those giants of jazz.
This was a quartet?
This is a quartet.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. This was a quintet because on saxophone was Jimmy Heath.
Jimmy Heath?
Jimmy Heath. That really kicked off for me. The recording with Philly Joe Jones, the name of the album was Blues for Dracula, and it got a little attention from the media. Max Roach heard that, and he had an opening in his group. Ray Draper, who was playing tuba with Max Roach, had left the group, and Max asked me if I would take Ray Draper's place.
What year was this? And this was your first as a leader?
As a leader, yes. Okay. That was in 1959.
59,
1959,
okay.
1960. I joined Max Roach in 60. So the recording was done in 59. I think it was actually released in 60. So I think on the the jacket. It states that it's from 1960.
Okay.
So that recording was titled "Swing." Keep swinging. I'm sorry. Keep swinging. I think it was a photograph of this boxer. I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, I'm standing in front of this poster with this boxer with boxing gloves. And I had the trombone in my hand, and the title was "Keep Swinging." So that was kind of catchy. That was it was Orrin Keepman's idea to put that together. I have a lot of admiration and respect for Orrin. And he went on the road with Max Roach. When I joined the band, he had Booker Little and George Coleman and Art Davis playing bass, no piano. Shortly after that, Booker left, George Coleman left, Art Davis left, and he hired Stanley Turrentine and his brother Tommy, and on bass was Bobby Boswell. All three of them are from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Okay.
What did Tommy Turrentine play?
He played the trumpet.
Trumpet.
Yes,
Okay. All right.
Yes. Wonderful trumpet player.
All right.
So they joined Max Roach's group. We toured around Europe and the States with Max Roach's group with that personnel. And that lasted for 2 years. I left Max Roach and went out on the road with, of all people, Lloyd Price, Mr. Personality. And I left him, and at the end of that, we had a little falling out over money. And I went back to New York, and shortly after that, I got a call from one of the people in Ray Charles's group asking me if I would like to come out on the road with Ray Charles, which I accepted, and stayed with Ray Charles for about a year. I had an opportunity to write an arrangement for his band, which he recorded. That album is called Ray Charles Live. And after I left Ray Charles, I went back to New York and established myself as freelance trombonist in New York. I played a little politics with the contractors who had control over the theater, the Broadway pit orchestra thing, and I wanted to make some money, and that was the route that I decided to take, because being on call for recordings, commercial recordings, I could do 3 or 4 recordings a week. And in the pit orchestra at Schubert Theater, where I acquired a position, that was a steady salary. And so I stayed in that environment, made a lot of money, also spent a lot of money because there was an ongoing political scene. And there's a particular establishment as a bar and restaurant, Jim and Andy's it was called, where all the studio musicians and contractors frequented that place. And it was like politics, we laughed at unfunny jokes and we bought drinks for people we hardly knew, that kind of thing. I arranged to accumulate a $750 bar tab, during the period that I was doing that. And also that was sort of like a lesson of what not to do. Also, I was brought to my senses when I realized that I was not having a lot of fun. I wasn't playing hardly any jazz at all. I had an opportunity to go to Europe for a week to 10 days with the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra. I received permission from the contractor at the Schubert Theater, and he granted me that leave of absence. And that was good for my spirit. I had a great time. Went back to work at the Schubert Theater after that. A few months later, as a result of me getting a call to go to record with the Duke Ellington Orchestra because one of the trombone players in the Duke's band didn't show up for the recording session. I got that call, and within half an hour I was there with my horn, ready to play. And on the strength of that, a few weeks or maybe a month or so later, I got another call from Joe Benjamin, who was playing bass with Duke Ellington's orchestra at the time, asking me if I would like to go on tour with the Duke Ellington Orchestra. They were on a State Department tour of the Orient, which was going to take them to Japan, Australia, Philippines, Okinawa, I think it was on that list, to Burma, to Laos. I think that's all the places, the countries we were going to. Anyway, when I asked for permission to do that, the contractor said no.
Duke Ellington.
Duke Ellington, right. So that was my last.
Oh wow.
My last job with the
Schubert
Theater. I left. I packed my horn and left. Didn't even go back to pick up my salary, and I just put it behind me. And I went out the road with Duke Ellington, and that was an awesome experience. Just being, rubbing shoulders with people like Harry Carney, Johnny Hodges, Russell Procope, Paul Gonsalves, who's my heart, and also the Cat Anderson, Cootie Williams, and that whole crew. I was successful in that, but at the same time I was beginning to realize that, hey, as much as I respect and love this music and the members of the orchestra, I was too young. My head was in more modern music, bebop in particular. Although I respected the music of Duke Ellington with the highest respect for that, and for the individuals that were producing that music, but participating in that, and I played the role. I put on my suit and my tie and had my little bottle of scotch in my bag and went to the hotel and poured myself a drink, just like all the rest of the members of the orchestra were doing. And I wasn't happy. And personally, I was not happy. I wanted to fulfill my own ambitions and desires. So fate stepped in. We were scheduled to go on a tour of Europe. The night before, we were supposed to leave. I packed my bag, ready to go, and couldn't find my passport, which put everything on hold. I went to the airport I went to the airport hoping that Duke could pull some strings and get me on this airplane, which was fantasy. It just couldn't be done. So that was my last engagement, the last opportunity to keep performing with Duke Ellington. But it freed me from that burden that I was living with. I went back to New York and put together my own little quartet. We were rehearsing and preparing to put that whole thing to use, preparing to start working, in the clubs around New York and eventually recording and going on. But after a few months of that, my funds that I had saved up, because the money that Duke was paying was substantially more than what Lionel Hampton was paying. So I was able to stash some money away. But then that was dwindling, and I got a call from Garnet Brown who asked me to go out on the road, take his place with the Herbie Hancock group. Supposed to be for 3 weeks. He had an assignment, a writing assignment. He was also a wonderful, talented composer and arranger. And so I accepted this opportunity to put some money in my pocket and go on the road with Herbie Hancock for 3 weeks, which turned into 3 years. And the reason for that is that conceptually, the music that we were producing in the Herbie Hancock group was the exact same music that I was trying to create on my own with my own group. So it satisfied that aspect of my yearnings. And I was also put in the company of Billy Hart on drums, Buster Williams on bass, Benny Maupin on saxophone, Eddie Henderson on trumpet, and also Herbie Hancock on piano. And the recordings and the performances that came out of that, I can't even find the adjectives to describe how wonderful that was.
What years were you with Herbie Hancock?
That was from 1970 through 1973.
Okay.
Yeah.